Hi, Giuliana. We'd be starting in a few moments. We are just waiting for a few more people to join in. So as soon as they join in, we'd be starting off. Thanks a lot for joining
Sure.
in.
Great, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining in. We'd be waiting for more people to join in, and we'll just be beginning in a few minutes. Thanks. Hi everyone, we'll be beginning in 2 minutes. Great. So, thanks a lot for joining in, everyone. In today's webinar, we'd be talking about some of the best practices that you can adopt on Slack, Google Chat, and MS Teams, uh, basically for HR and people ops folks, right? So, traditionally, us HR folks, what we do is that we have most of our workflows either on web based applications or sometimes on Excel sheets or other tools, and the idea is that all of these workflows are scattered about. So today we are going to talk about a new approach where you can bring all of these workflows onto Slack, Google Chat, and Microsoft Teams. And the idea is to make these workflows more efficient for all the three interested stakeholders, so the employees, the managers, and the administrators, that are the management. So the idea is to make these workflows um, more efficient for all these parties involved. The agenda for today actually is quite packed. So we'd be starting off with a small blurb about ourselves. Then we'd be talking about Slack's latest release, which is the Workflow Builder, and how people ops teams and HR teams can use the Workflow Builder. Then we would be visiting some of the specific areas of HR and people ops, like hiring, new employee onboarding, time and attendance, employee engagement, so on and so forth. So let's get started. So first up, a bit about ourselves. So we are a company that started off 3 years back. We are called Anake, and what we specialize in is building tools, HR-based tools over chat platforms. So currently, you'd find us on three chat platforms: Slack, Microsoft Teams, and Google Chat. And those are our three products: Attendance Bot, Office Amp, and Expense Tron. And we'd be visiting these products one by one as we go ahead in the webinar. Great. But first up, I'd like to talk about Slack's latest release, the new Workflow Builder. And I was really excited about when I first heard that Slack was going to launch something like this, because of the fact that Workflow Builder is a visual tool that allows you to automate messages that are to be sent across to employees. So you can automate messages, you can go ahead and request employee information, you can also capture some incident reports using the Workflow Builder. So there are a bunch of use cases that Slack has themselves suggested for the new Workflow Builder that they have launched. And I have been taking a look at it for the past week or so, and I'm really excited about how you can integrate that into the HR and people ops domain. And then we are going to be looking at some of the use cases that are specifically tailored to the HR and people ops teams as we proceed in the webinar. The advantages of using the Workflow Builder within the organization, I think, are threefold. So I think the first thing is that you don't have to chase people down to get work done. You can send out some automated messages through the Workflow Builder, and Slack ensures that they're routed to the right teams, and then work happens, right? You can also go ahead and skip all the unnecessary follow-ups, following up with people, and Slack would do that automatically for you. So Slack would go ahead and have reminders or continuous updates about what has been happening on a particular task. So that also can be plugged into the workflow builder. And then obviously when there are no follow-ups and you don't have to chase people, then work happens quickly and everybody, it's a win-win situation for everybody. So this is in a nutshell about workflow builder. We are not done yet. We'd be talking more about it as we proceed. But for now, we'd move on to some of the hiring best practices. So hiring is one of the major things that we as people ops folks want to do, right? You want to make sure that you hire the right talent for your organization. And what we want to show over here is that how you can go ahead and plug all of your hiring workflows into Slack, Google Chat, and MS Teams, right? Uh, Both MS Teams and Slack and even Google Chat has this wonderful idea of channels. And what you can do is that you can go about creating channels for your hiring needs. So over here, you can just coordinate the pipeline for your employees, and then collaborate on the JDs, discuss the future hiring needs. For example, like 2020 is just coming up, so you may want to reassess the hiring needs at the start of the year or just before the year begins. So you can open up a private channel called hiring needs and carry all of those conversations out on that channel. Then you can open a public channel called open jobs, which is basically to get referrals from all of the employees, and people can go ahead, give referrals regarding the various open jobs that you have within the organization. You can also have an interview channel. So when you're preparing panelists for interviewing employees, future hires, right? So you can just go ahead and have discussions on this particular channel. And once the interview of a future hire is done, then you can also get feedback from the managers on this particular channel. This again has to be a private channel because the conversation is only restricted to the panelists and the HR team. So this again has to be a private channel. And finally, you can have a channel, private channel called compensation, where you discuss new offers that you're going to be forwarding to the future hires. Any questions so far before we move ahead? Any questions? So you'd by default be muted. Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask me any question. In case you have any question in the middle, feel free to cut me off and ask your question right there and then. Right. So I don't see any questions, so I'll move ahead. Uh, there are some more hiring tools, some Slack add-ons that I personally like, and that all the teams that we work with are a real boon for them. So you can go ahead, give Greenhouse a try, and then you can go ahead and give Lever a try. The whole idea is that it would make your hiring workflow a lot easier. And all of the things that we've discussed on the previous slides, these are add-ons that solve those problems. So in case you just want to go ahead, give it a try, you can do that. I'm pretty certain about the fact that both Greenhouse and Lever have a Slack extension, and then they also have for all of the folks who are on MS Teams or Slack, you can just go ahead and give Lever and Greenhouse a try, right? So now from hiring, we would move on to onboarding. Something that I find equally interesting and equally important within the organization. And we'll talk about some of the best practices that Slack has within the onboarding domain. So we first start off by discussing that how Slack uses Slack to onboard new hires. Now, Slack is a big company, and the idea is that they've got this workspace dedicated to new hires, and where they have multiple channels, and then each new cohort can visit specific channels to get answers to their questions, right? So while that is an approach that works wonderfully well for an organization of Slack scale, it may not be suggested for some of the mid or small sized firms, right? So what Slack would do is that they would give access to their new hires 2 weeks before they start, and then there would be regular reminders related to onboarding tasks, or if they have to add their photo, give a small blurb about themselves, or complete any of the documentation. So there would be regular reminders about that. You can also go ahead and have resources like, where do you live in SF, where do you eat in SF, where do you go hang out in New York, all of that. And you could also go, the new hires basically can just scroll through channels and look at the questions that the previous hires have asked, right? So that's how Slack does onboarding. So as I previously said, that Slack is a big organization. This workflow works great for them. If you're a small or a mid-sized firm, what I would suggest is that you can do something similar, but at a scale that suits the size of the firm. So you can just invite the new hires as single channel guests and have a dedicated channel for every new cohort, right? So that's a bit about how we use channels for onboarding. If you need more help on onboarding, Donut is a tool that I personally like and I use quite a lot of. Has a Slack add-on, has an MS Teams add-on. And the idea within Donut is that, over a 30-day, 60-day, or a 90-day period, the employees would be onboarded. So you can go about creating customized plans, and the employees would be onboarded as and when they complete their tasks. They can just go ahead and mark those tasks as complete, and their managers would get notification related to that. And the idea again is that over a 60-day period, you need to complete the onboarding process, right? So that's about Donut. A little bit about welcoming new hires. So what I have done personally within our organization is that there is a channel that's dedicated to welcoming new hires, where we send out blurbs about each of the new employees, and then people can just uh, come and welcome them on that particular channel, right? You can also go ahead and pin some resources onto these channels. You can have a channel dedicated solely to new hires and pin some resources related to onboarding documents, or what do they really need to do to get started. So, as a recent example, what I did was that we did a couple of new hires in the customer success team, and then I created a channel solely for them. And I, of course, uploaded the onboarding documents onto the channel. But what I also did was that I uploaded documents related to some of the workflows related to customer success in the organization. And then these employees can just read through those documents and, get acquainted within the first week of how the culture within the organization is, and what the uh, what role what are the specifics of their role, right? So they can uh, get informed about that, right? Now, there's earlier we talked about the Slack workflow builder. There are very interesting onboarding use cases using the Slack workflow builder, right? So, what you can do is that in case you are going to onboard new employees, so you can just use the workflow builder to send out automated messages to these new hires. And these automated messages can be documents that it could be customized plans that you want them to complete, or they could be onboarding documents, or they could be just some information about the company, documentation about the company, where the company is headed, what the vision is, etc., etc., right? So you can use the Slack workflow builder for onboarding as well. I do suggest that you go ahead and give it a try. It's a very visual tool, and I'm pretty sure that you would enjoy building a lot of complex workflows on Slack, and how Slack resolves those problems for you, right? You could also go ahead and request for more information from employees using the workflow builder. Now, what workflow builder has is the idea of forms. Now, Slack has launched this new idea of forms, where you can just go ahead and have employee preferences. So, for example, if you want any of the food related information, or employee related information related to blood group or anything, you can just ask that through a form. And then what employees would be able to do is that they would just be able to fill out that form, and that information would automatically be submitted to you. So that's the magic of the workflow builder. You can use that for employee onboarding. I'm pretty sure it would make a lot of your processes easier. Great. So before we move ahead, any questions so far? Okay, great. No questions. Okay. So moving ahead now from onboarding, hiring, we would move on to attendance, right? And we'd be visiting uh, paid time off and vacations, and then we would be visiting some other specific use cases if you want to track the time that employees spend within office, right? So on Slack, what you can do is that you can add this great little tool that we have called attendance bot, and you can send out direct messages to the bot and request for time off. So if you want to apply for a vacation, you can just say out of office tomorrow, and what the bot will do is that it will give you a confirmation prompt. You can leave behind a comment for your manager, and then you can just go ahead and confirm that vacation. The manager on the other end would receive a notification on their Slack, and they'll be able to approve your vacation right from within Slack, right? So you don't really need to go ahead and go anywhere. You can uh, create vacation request on Slack, MS Teams, and Google Chat, and your managers would just be able to approve those requests from the instant messaging platform that you are using. So in case you want to integrate all the tools that you use within the organization and have one tool, so I would suggest that you can use all of the tools. You can use attendance bot as a tool on your IM platform, right? Moving ahead, once the manager has approved the vacation request, you can also go ahead and check your balances. So for example, if the organization has specific vacation days that you can take, so you can just go ahead and have vacation quota. So you can specify the number of days that the employees can take as vacation, the number of days that the employees can take as sick time off, and then the employees would be able to check their balances, and each time they request for time off, that would get deducted from their balances, right? Now, the idea of attendance bot is that we want to ensure transparency within the organization, and we do that by various methods. So, one of my favorite methods is that we have the idea of announcements and notifications, wherein what you can do is that if you've got channels inside Slack and MS Teams, you can just invite attendance bot onto that particular channel, and then we'd be able to broadcast information related to Sarah is out of office, or Ken is working from home today, or Glenn is sick today, right? So all of that information would be broadcasted onto that channel. uh, all of the stakeholders, the employees, the managers, and the management would come to know of who is working from office and who is out of office with these particular announcements. We would capture the same information on the calendar interface as well that you currently see on your screen, and then all of the employee vacations would be shown on that calendar as well. Plus, the calendar would also show you the total holidays that you have within the year. So Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of that would show up on the calendar as well. So each time you want to know that how many employees are working out of office, what you can do is you can either go to that channel where you've invited attendance bot, scroll through that channel, and then see how many employees are out of office in a particular week or in the upcoming days. Or you can go ahead and visit the calendar. The advantage of the calendar, of course, is that you'd be able to see for the whole month that how many employees are out of office, and then you can plan in advance that what the bandwidth of the team looks like and take up projects according to that, right? What you can also do is that as a manager, you can pull up the summary of your team. So when you say summary to the bot would be able to pull up the absence summary for your team. So we'd show you the absence summary for your team today, your team tomorrow, and the recent and upcoming leaves for all your employees, right? Lastly, what I would like to mention is that you can also go ahead and integrate your Google and Outlook calendar with attendance bot. So the idea is that whenever you're out of office, we're going to block those days for you, and nobody would be able to calendar time with you. So whenever somebody tries to calendar time with you, they'd get your vacation responder saying that, hey, seems like this person is out of office. Why don't you choose another day to calendar time with him? Right. So that, in a nutshell, is about attendance bot, vacation, and PTO. Before we move forward, I'd just like to ask: are there any questions at this point? Questions, questions, questions. Okay, great. No questions. Right. So we'll move ahead. Now we'll talk a bit about time tracking. So time tracking is actually pretty simple. When you come into the organization, you just say into the bot. When you're heading out, you just say out to the bot, and the bot will be able to track that what are the total number of hours that you've spent within the organization. Now in case you want to pull up their time card at a later point, then what you do is that you just say timesheet to the bot, and then you'll be able to pull up that how many total number of hours have the employees worked, and we would be collating that data over a payroll cycle. So for example, if you've got a 15-day payroll cycle or a 30-day payroll cycle, you'd get to know the total number of hours that the employee has worked in a particular month or in a particular week, right? So that's about time tracking. You've also got a very good method of tracking how many employees are currently working, how many employees are out, and how many employees are on a break by the punch board. So the punch board that you see on your screen is basically where you go ahead and get a live punch status of your team, and you'll be able to keep a tab on how many employees are currently out of office, how many of them are working, and how many of them are on a break. Great. So, with that, we would change gears and we would move forward to something that we often struggle with. And that is that if you've got certain employee questions that you want to answer, how do you go about doing that? Now, one of the obvious methods is that we've been discussing the Slack workflow builder till now. So, you can go ahead and have an automated message sent out to the employees, having a document of all of the FAQs, right? That's one way to do it. However, a more effective method is that if there was a product that would auto resolve all of the employee questions, right? So with Office AMP, we aim to do that. Office AMP is basically a product where you can go ahead and create HR requests. So if you want to go ahead, create requests like, hey, I need more visiting cards. So you can just go ahead, create that request on Office AMP, and then that'll get allocated to the associated category owner, and the category owner would be able to work on that request and resolve that request, right? So that's the idea of Office AMP. One of my favorite features within the product is the idea of a knowledge base. So what you can do with an Office AMP is that you can go ahead, create a knowledge base, put in all of the FAQs that employees ask, and whenever employee types out that question, the bot will aim to auto resolve it. So for example, you want to ask questions related to your 401ks, you want to ask questions related to employee benefits, you want to ask questions related to medical insurance. So all of those things can be put onto the bot, and the employees would be able to the bot would be able to auto resolve those employee concerns. And so this is generic information, right? And you can just put it out there and the employees would be able to access them, right? So we've talked about creating HR requests and managing HR requests within Office AMP. Now we'd be moving forward to expense tracking. Uh, and the whole idea of doing expense tracking is that traditionally, all the teams, in my experience, all the teams that I work with, uh, come to us saying that we do expense tracking either via Excel sheets or via products that we don't really enjoy interacting with. So when we started building ExpenseTron, the whole idea behind that was, a, we wanted to keep the UI really intuitive. B, what we wanted to do was that we wanted to make it real time for everyone to be able to access expense data. So those are the two things that I really like about ExpenseTron. So you can just send out a simple message saying that I had $8 coffee with a client yesterday, and the bot would be able to create an expense, and you would be able to upload a receipt associated with an expense. Once you confirm the expense, this would get passed on to your manager, and your manager would be able to approve the expense by looking at the receipt that has been uploaded, right? So that's the whole expense creation and expense approval workflow. There are certain special use cases. So ExpenseTron would also understand that if you were creating an expense in another currency. So for example, if I'm in Canada, I may want to say that hired an Uber for 25 CAD, and the bot would be able to understand that and show you the dollar equivalent of that. The bot would also be able to understand if you create mileage expenses. So you can just say, drove 220 miles from New York to Boston, and then you can put in a mileage rate into the bot, and the bot would be able to calculate the amount for you. And subsequently, the employee can upload a receipt associated with the expense, and the expense would get approved in a similar fashion as we have discussed before, right? So this is the expense application creation and approval workflow. uh, Two things that I'd like to mention over here is the underlying product philosophy of the bot is that everything gets approved in real time. So you create an expense as of today, and then that gets approved in about an hour or so, whenever your manager has the time to look at it and click the approve button. That's how the expense gets approved, right? There are a couple of integrations that I'd like to talk about over here. I'll mention it in passing, and in case any of you have any questions about those integrations, we could probably take it at a later point. So ExpenseTron is currently integrated with Xero, QuickBooks, and Google Drive. The idea of integrating it with Xero and QuickBooks is that in case you work with any of those tools, we'd automatically be able to sync up your expenses with Xero and QuickBooks. And the idea of syncing up with Google Drive is that in case you want a centralized repository for all of your receipts, so you can just what we do for you is that we'll create this one big Google Drive folder where all of your receipts would be categorized. We have our first question of the webinar, and I hope it's a question. Oh, okay, cool, thanks a lot for informing. Yep. So yeah, continuing. We'd now go ahead and talk about a little bit about employee engagement, right? So employee engagement is something that we are really concerned about, and the idea for us people ops folks is to have a happy, satisfied workforce, right? Uh, there's a tool that I'd like to recommend that does this very well, and the tool is called Poly. I'm pretty sure if you've been working in Slack or MS Teams for a long time, you may have heard of it. The idea of the tool is that they would send out questions to employees, and they would ask the employees to either agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or be neutral to particular questions. So for example, if you go ahead, ask a question, do you think that the organization offers learning and development opportunities, right? And the employees can go ahead, agree, disagree, strongly disagree to that. And Poly is going to gauge the employee sentiment within the organization related to that issue over a period of time, right? So you can see graphs like these, and you can say, okay, so we want to optimize this number or optimize this rating, and here's how we are going to be able to do that. So you can then to optimize these ratings, go out and roll out a bunch of plans that would address that particular issue. uh yeah, now some fun. So if you this is Lunchrain is a very fun tool for food. So the idea is that in case you're new to SF, new to NY, or anywhere in the world, you can just go ahead and start a thread that you're just heading out to lunch for coffee for Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or wherever, and then other people would be able to join the train and join you for coffee, right? So you can just go ahead, do that. The tool is a lot of fun. So in case you want to roll it out for your new hires, you should go ahead, give it a try. Uh, there's certain more things that we'd like to talk about. So the idea of channels is one of my favorite within Slack and MS Teams. And then I use channels in a bunch of ways. So we've talked about using channels for hiring. We've talked about channels for onboarding, right? We would now like to talk about some other things that you can do on channels. So you can go ahead, create volunteer programs, professional development clubs, or diversity groups within Slack, right? And all these could be channels. And employees can just go ahead and interact on these particular channels. One thing that I have done is that I've also created channels related to sales wins, or created channels related to product launches. So each time there is a new product launch, the whole team can get together and rejoice the success of that particular uh, project, right? One thing that is really essential is that in order to maintain a satisfied workforce, you want to communicate the vision of the organization to the employees very clearly. And the idea is to maintain transparency regarding that. So, what I have done within the organization is that we've got this thing called the Ask Me Anything channel, where all of our employees are added, and the senior management can just go ahead, post updates over there, or answer any questions that the employees have. And this is very effective in creating an open dialogue between the senior management and the employees. I think it helps, it goes a long way in ensuring that the employees have a feeling of belongingness towards the company, right? So now I think we've pretty much come to the end of the presentation. And what I'd like to do is that I'd like to summarize all that we've talked about. So we talked about the Slack workflow builder, Slack's new launch. So I would first off request you to go ahead, give that a try. We talked about certain people ops and HR workflows that can be integrated with the workflow builder, right? So onboarding was one of them, and you can go ahead and start using the workflow builder for onboarding. We talked about creating channels for hiring needs, discussing compensation, onboarding employees, and maintaining a satisfied workforce. And so channels go a long way in ensuring that all of your HR workflows happen in an efficient manner, and all of your HR workflows are clearly communicated to the employees, managers, and the senior management, right? So I think overall, transferring all of your HR based workflows ensures that you create a good company culture and you keep a good workforce engaged within the organization, and it helps in ensuring transparency within the organization. So I think with that we've come to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at hi@anek, but I'd like to ask you if you've got any questions. As of now, I'm happy to answer those for you. Any questions, comments, feedback, concerns? All of them are welcome. Alrighty, none so far. Okay, great. So, thanks a lot for joining in. Now, this webinar is a part of a series of webinars that we've been running. So, I would encourage you to go ahead, join in the other webinars as well. You'd be getting notifications related to the other webinars, and we'd be visiting some of the other HR and people ops workflows within those webinars as well. So, feel free to join in. In case you want to have a detailed conversation about any of the products that we've visited within this webinar, feel free to go ahead and contact me at hi@anek.com, and we'd be able to circle back and help you guys out. So thanks a lot for joining in. Really appreciate your time. Have a great day ahead.